Have you ever faced a challenge that just seemed so massive, so completely impossible, that your first thought was just no way? Well, today we're going to break down an ancient story that is basically a masterclass in strategy for those exact moments. It's the incredible story of how a tiny army of 300 defeated a force of over 135,000, not with swords and shields, but with one of the most brilliant, counterintuitive plans you'll ever hear. So here's how we're going to unpack this. We'll start in a place of total despair, watch a leader go through a radical downsizing of his own forces, and see how it all leads to one of the most astonishing victories ever recorded. Trust me, this isn't just a story about courage. It's a playbook for how to flip the script when everything is against you. Okay, so to really get why this victory was so mind-blowing, you first have to understand just how hopeless the situation was. For 7 straight years, the people of Israel were living in a state of constant fear. They were completely dominated by their enemies, the Midianites. Now, the enemy wasn't just some small raiding party. They were like a force of nature. Every single harvest season, the Midianites and their allies would swarm the land like a plague of locusts, just wiping out all the crops, stealing the livestock, everything. It got so bad that the Israelites had to abandon their homes and literally go into hiding in caves and mountain fortresses, all just to survive. And it's in this climate of absolute fear that we meet our main character, Gideon. But let's be clear, he is no hero, not yet. Not even close. When we first meet him, he's the very definition of playing it safe. He's secretly threshing a little bit of wheat inside a wine press, a pit for grapes, just so the enemy won't find it. This is a man who is just completely consumed by the crushing reality of his situation. So when an angel shows up and calls him a mighty warrior, his reaction isn't confidence, it's just disbelief. He's basically like, "You've got to be kidding me. You have the wrong guy." He points out that his family's clan is the weakest one around, and he's the least important person in his own family. He is so full of doubt that he asks for a sign from God, not once, but twice, with those famous tests using the wool fleece. So yeah, this story doesn't start with a confident champion. It starts with a very relatable, very scared man. Okay, so after a small act of defiance, Gideon's reputation starts to grow, and he actually manages to gather an army. But this is where the whole strategy takes a hard left turn, into what sounds like complete military suicide. He blows a trumpet, and men from all the nearby tribes start showing up. He pulls together a pretty respectable force of 32,000 soldiers. Now, keep in mind, they're up against about 135,000 enemy troops, so that's still a scary 4-to-1 disadvantage. But hey, it's a start, right? Well, apparently not, because God's response is a total shocker. And right here, the core principle for this whole operation gets laid out. The victory has to be so mathematically impossible, so completely unbelievable, that no one could ever say, "Oh yeah, our strategy and strength won the day." The credit couldn't go to men. So the Great Army Purge begins. The first cut is just psychologically brilliant. Gideon is told to announce that anyone who is scared can just leave. No questions asked, no shame. It's a simple way to weed out the soldiers who would be a liability and a tough fight anyway. But the result of this announcement, it is absolutely staggering. 22,000 men. That's more than 2/3 of his entire army. They just turn around and walk home. Just like that, his force drops to only 10,000. So the odds just went from 4-to-1 against him to almost 14-to-1. And you know what? God tells him the army is still too big. The downsizing isn't done. Now, this next part is so interesting because the final test is a character test, but it's disguised as just getting a drink of water. Gideon takes his men down to a spring, and of course, they're thirsty. Almost all of them, 9,700 guys, they get down on their knees and put their faces right in the water to drink. They're focused on themselves, totally vulnerable, not paying attention. But a tiny group, just 300 men, do something completely different. They stay on their feet, scoop the water up with their hands, and lap it like a dog, all while their eyes are still up, scanning the area, staying alert. And those 300? Those are the ones who are chosen. The army is now down to its elite core. They weren't picked for being the biggest or the strongest, but for their character. That constant state of readiness that was revealed when they didn't even know they were being tested. So, the final force is set. 300 Israelites against 135,000 Midianites. The odds are now impossible. Okay, so with his tiny little army of 300, Gideon is, understandably nervous. I mean, the sheer absurdity of the odds is probably weighing on him pretty heavily. So God gives him one last little boost of confidence. But this time, it's not a miracle. It's good old-fashioned intelligence. He's told to just sneak down to the edge of the Midianite camp and listen. So under the cover of darkness, he and his servant Porah creep down the hill to the valley, where the enemy is just spread out for miles, a sea of tents and camels as far as they can see. As he gets close, he overhears a Midianite soldier telling his friend about this really bizarre dream he had. He dreamed that a simple loaf of barley bread came rolling down into their camp, hit a tent, and the whole thing just collapsed. Now, that sounds pretty weird, I know, but you have to hear the interpretation his friend gives him. And this right here is the brilliant part. See, barley was the cheapest grain around. It was food for the poor, for livestock. It was the perfect symbol for the scrappy, underestimated Israelite army. And the enemy soldier, he gets it instantly. He says the barley loaf is Gideon's army, and it's going to destroy them. And in that moment, Gideon gets it. The most powerful weapon he has is that the enemy is already defeated in their own heads. Fear had already done half the work for him. Hearing that fear-filled prophecy from the enemy's own mouth completely flips the switch in Gideon. All his doubt just evaporates, and it's replaced with rock-solid confidence. He races back to his 300 men, not with the big speech, but with probably the most unconventional battle plan in the history of warfare. Just look at their weapons. These aren't swords and spears. These are tools of psychological terror. Every man gets a trumpet, an empty clay jar, and a torch to hide inside of it. Every single item is designed to mess with the enemy's minds and turn their biggest strength, their huge numbers, into their single greatest weakness. The strategy is a pure masterclass in creating sensory overload. He splits his 300 men into 3 groups, surrounding the massive camp on 3 sides. They wait for the middle watch of the night, around 10 p.m., when everyone's deep asleep and the new guards are just getting settled. Then, on Gideon's signal, all 300 men, at the exact same time, are going to smash their jars, blow their trumpets, and hold up their burning torches, all while screaming a terrifying battle cry. The result is pure, unfiltered chaos. Just imagine you're one of those sleeping soldiers. You're jolted awake by the sound of smashing pottery all around you, the deafening blast of 300 trumpets that sound like thousands, and you open your eyes to see a ring of fire surrounding the entire camp. In the dark and the confusion, you'd think a massive army was overrunning you. So you grab your sword and you attack the first person you see, who is, of course, another panicked Midianite soldier. Their giant army completely implodes, fighting itself before fleeing in absolute terror. So, what's the big lesson here? What can we pull from this incredible story? Well, it's way more than just an old war story. It's like a timeless blueprint for winning when the odds feel completely stacked against you. It's got these core principles that honestly apply to any major challenge you can think of. This story really leaves us with some powerful, actionable ideas. First, true strength isn't about having the most people, it's about having a clear, unified purpose. Second, a small, committed team chosen for their character and alertness is way more valuable than a huge, unfocused crowd. Third, and this is a big one, understanding the psychology of your opponent can be more powerful than any weapon. Fourth, sometimes you have to have the guts to follow a plan that seems totally absurd, because that's where the breakthroughs happen. And finally, a leader's own confidence, once they truly have it, is the spark that lights the fire for everyone else. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. This whole story challenges us to look at our own giant Midianite-sized problems and ask a different kind of question. Instead of asking, how can I get more resources? Maybe we should be asking, what's the unconventional approach here? What's the psychological key I'm missing? What impossible victory might be waiting for you if only you had the courage to try a 300-style solution? Thanks for joining this explainer.